Hello and welcome to the inaugural screencast for Sci-Inspire. Sci-Inspire screencast number 1, website prototype. My name is Matt Schaff, and the purpose of this screencast is to give you an idea as to how the website would work within the Sci-Inspire system. That's me smiling and waving at the bottom. To navigate you through my imagination, I'm going to use this concept map as a guide. It tries to illustrate the major ideas, and you can find it at sci-inspire.org. As you may know, Sci-Inspire is a vision for a nationwide movement to counter and maybe help reverse the unfortunate lag in K-12 science performance that we've seen for the past few decades. The goal of Sci-Inspire is to boost science attitudes and aptitudes in American youth by unleashing the potential of K-12 science outreach and near-peer role modeling. The objective is to dramatically increase the number of science college students serving as positive near-peer role models in K-12 science outreach. The method is twofold. First, to deploy a website that trains volunteers, matches them to educators, and facilitates the partnership with resources and communication. The second part of the method is to activate an on-the-ground Sci-Inspire community. There will be two main users of the Sci-Inspire website. The first is the science college student. Here's the user profile of our sample science college student on the Sci-Inspire prototype website. Our student's name is Claire. She has a bio, and she has the following academic interests: physics, biology, chemistry, earth science, mathematics, and astronomy. To get involved, the science college student would go through a standard registration process, username, password, etc. And the first thing the college student would do is join the volunteer community at his or her college or university. Before we talk about that, here's Claire's Student Center. Every user has a center of sorts, which you could think of as a web dashboard that collects information and action items relevant to each user. Here on Claire's dashboard, we can see that the first thing she did after registering was join the XYZ volunteer community. Here's the group page for the XYZ volunteer community, associated with an institution of higher education, which in this case is XYZ University, and managed by the Sci-Inspire site coordinator at that institution. His username is present site coordinator in this case. The group page serves as a means of communication within the volunteer community and with the outside world. On the group page, the site coordinator can set house rules, and members can talk to each other about upcoming events and other things. Next step in the idea flow. After joining the community, the aspiring volunteer, like Claire, will take the Sci-Inspire Science Outreach crash course, which will train him or her in the ways of K-12 science outreach. Back to our Student Center. Here we see the link to the Science Outreach crash course. And here's the course. Right now, the Science Outreach crash course is a basic infrastructure into which content will be inserted later. The lessons will teach the important concepts ranging from translating science to different K-12 levels, to partnering with educators, to managing a rowdy classroom. Aspiring volunteers like Claire will navigate through these lessons, and I'll navigate with you. So again, these are just dummy lessons here, and we're navigating. They'll navigate through these lessons until they hit a quiz, or there'll be quizzes all throughout the lessons. Here's a dummy quiz, but it would be normally a science outreach quiz. Who's the 42nd president? Well, yeah. I'll just complete this for you. And look at that, 100%. Claire has completed her online training. So on to the next step in the idea flow. This block right here, My Projects, would normally contain the K-12 science outreach projects matched to the science college student volunteer. But if you notice, it says here that Claire cannot be matched to educational projects until she completes the crash course and becomes a certified volunteer. Now that's the next step. An online course can only do so much. We need people on the ground to not only ensure volunteer quality, but to align the volunteers with the interests of the group and larger institution. Each community should be at liberty to generate and enforce its own standards. That's why in Sci-Inspire, aspiring volunteers such as Claire must customize one of Sci-Inspire's science outreach lesson templates, to be discussed later, and present it for the approval of the community's site coordinator, as they would present it in front of a K-12 audience. So let's say Claire scheduled her certification test through the XYZ group page and presented her K-12 science lesson in front of the community's site coordinator. Here's that community's site coordinator. His name is Andrew Clark. He's an assistant professor at XYZ University and site coordinator of the Sci-Inspire volunteer community at that university. Now, Andrew was very impressed by Claire, who in his mind passed the XYZ standards with flying colors. Now, Andrew wants to certify Claire, and he does that by accessing the group through his coordinator center. Goes to manage people in the group, and then goes to edit the membership status of the present student volunteer, the username of Claire. Present student volunteer. Clicks on certified and updates the membership. What you can see is, after certifying, present student volunteer, otherwise known as Claire, can now be matched with educational projects. All of the rights have now been bestowed upon Claire. She is a fully fledged Sci-Inspire volunteer. So up until now, we've only told one story, that of the college student aspiring volunteer. But there's another main type of website user, the K-12 educator. And it turns out that the experience of the educator with the website is very similar. Mirroring the process for the prospective volunteer, an educator first joins or creates the educator community at his or her K-12 school or program. Here's the profile for Mrs. Allison Reynolds, a teacher at the ABC Middle School, and clicking on this, we get to the Sci-Inspire educator community for the ABC Middle School. So educator group pages work in the same way as volunteer team pages, fostering communication and teamwork between members of the educator community. The ABC educator community is associated with ABC Middle School and requires these background checks for volunteers to volunteer at the ABC Middle School. Also, mirroring the prospective volunteer experience, there will be a tutorial course available that smooths an educator's entry into the system. By this point in the process, with everyone trained and with volunteers certified, both volunteers and educators, represented by Claire and Mrs. Reynolds respectively, are assumed ready to interact. Now comes the fun part. In the Sci-Inspire system, educators turn the wheels by posting projects, otherwise known as opportunities for K-12 science outreach, that Sci-Inspire then matches to volunteers. An educator like Mrs. Reynolds could desire near-peer science fair mentors for her K-12 students, or Sci-Inspire volunteers to enhance instruction of an educational unit. In our case, Mrs. Reynolds is teaching an educational unit about the human body and wants a college student volunteer to come in one day to give a lesson about the cardiovascular system. As Mrs. Reynolds, let's post this project. Mrs. Reynolds has perused Sci-Inspire's inventory of science lesson plan templates, which you can see right here, and she's especially liked this one, Exercise in the Heart, and deemed it appropriate for the project she's about to post. Here's the Exercise in the Heart lesson plan template. On the top left, you'll see that Sci-Inspire lesson plan templates are organized by subject area, grade level, educational standards, and how resource intensive it is. For example, a lesson that requires dry ice would probably be highly resource intensive. The lesson body contains teacher instructions, whereas the bottom contains any files that may be associated with the lesson, like handouts or PowerPoint presentations. Mrs. Reynolds really likes this lesson, so she chooses at the bottom to add it to her favorites. Now on to building the project. Here is Mrs. Reynolds' Educator Center. You can actually see the lesson we just favorited in the Favorites box, Exercise in the Heart. And also in the Educator Center, Mrs. Reynolds can post a new project. We're going to title this Heart Presentation. And for a description, Mrs. Reynolds would write, I need a Sci-Inspire volunteer to help teach my students about the cardiovascular system. And perhaps we can choose for subject areas biology and chemistry. Let's say this is a one-day event next Wednesday, the 13th of August, time being 1 p.m. to 1:50 p.m., a standard block of time. And because we favorited that lesson, we can actually associate this project with the lesson that we favorited, exercise in the heart, biology, all very consistent. All right, once we look it over, what we'll do is save this project. And we have posted our first project as Mrs. Reynolds. Next, Sci-Inspire automatically matches that project with volunteers based on a number of metrics, most importantly, academic interests of the volunteer. So to illustrate this, if we now go to the student center of our volunteer, Claire, when we refresh the page, we see that we have actually been matched to a project. In this case, the heart presentation. The project is ready for Claire to look at. Once matched, the volunteer indicates interest. Claire does this by clicking on the heart presentation. And then Claire makes sure that this project is right for her. She looks at all the information, from the dates to the times to the lesson, making sure she can perform the lesson. She also clicks here to look at the educator and the educator community, make sure that everything fits. And once Claire is confident, she goes up here and clicks, I am interested in this project. Now, Claire's interest request has been submitted to Mrs. Reynolds. You can imagine what's next here. The educator is notified of this match and approves of the match. Now I'm in Mrs. Reynolds' Educator Center. When I refresh, I can see that the heart presentation, my first project, has been matched to Claire. So I, as Mrs. Reynolds, examine Claire's profile and determine if I want to approve of the match. In this case, looking at her, all her interests, her beautiful bio. I look at her volunteer community. I don't see anything that would cause concern. So I'm going to go over here to the right and ask, would you like this match volunteer to partner with you in the below projects, heart presentation? I'm going to check yes and submit. If I were to go to the Student Center of Claire, if I would refresh, I would see that this project, this match, has been approved. Now, the next step in the partnership is for the educator and volunteer to communicate in advance of the K-12 interaction. They plan for the project in real time. Let's see how this works. For Mrs. Reynolds' Educator Center, I can click on the project entitled Heart Presentation, and on the right-hand side, I see I can open a conversation with the matched volunteer. Also, if I'd like, I can make scheduling such a conversation easier with a scheduling widget right here. But for simplicity, let's say we've already scheduled this conversation and both Mrs. Reynolds and Claire are online. I'm going to pull up Claire's account, and the two partners in Science Outreach can start talking. On the top of the screen is Mrs. Reynolds. On the bottom is Claire. As Mrs. Reynolds, right up here, I'm going to click Start Conversation. And look what happens. Claire receives a message from Mrs. Reynolds that she's trying to talk to her, and Claire opens it, and here we go. All right, as Mrs. Reynolds. Mrs. Reynolds asks, "Hi Claire, so excited to work with you. What do you think of the lesson template I picked out?" Claire says, "Hi Mrs. Reynolds, I think it'll be a fun experience. I like the lesson template. I'm wondering if I can add another collaborative activity in which students join together to form a theatrical cardiovascular system." And as Mrs. Reynolds, I say, sounds great. But, and so on and so on. This conversation goes until both parties have set clear expectations and build confidence about the impending K-12 science outreach experience. After that first conversation, the volunteer, such as Claire, customizes the lesson template to fit everyone's preferences, having real-time conversations with the educator as needed. And one day, the Science Outreach Project finally starts. Trained, prepared, and acquainted, the volunteer and educator work together to make the experience a success. So there you have it, the concept. With each new project, educators and volunteers round this loop of Sci-Inspire participation, and opportunities to unleash positive, near-peer science role modeling are greatly expanded and streamlined for everyone. There are 1,001 functionalities I'm currently building into this website, but you now have the fundamental idea. To learn more, go to our placeholder site, sci-inspire.org, and feel encouraged to send me your questions and suggestions. Sci-Inspire will only get off the ground if we work together.